This episode of Lunch Break is brought to you by Bobby G's Chicago Eatery and Sports Bar in Milton, Georgia. Located 650 miles south of Chicago, Bobby G's strives to create an authentic Chicago eatery and sports experience right in the heart of the South. And be sure to check out their weekly dine-in specials, including $3 domestic drafts and $5 burgers on Mondays, or half-price wings after 5 and trivia on Wednesdays. Bobby G's, welcome to the big city.
Please don't bother me, I'm on my lunch break. Pizza, burger, sandwich, lunch break, tofu, salad, hot dog, lunch break.
Welcome to another edition of Lunch Break. I'm Kathleen Sturgeon.
I'm AJ McNaughton.
Today we have taken the show on the road to Cherry Street Brewing in Forsyth County, and we are joined by Nick Tanner himself.
Thank you guys for having me.
The Brewmaster.
The Brewmaster, indeed.
We're very excited to be here. This is the first show that we've done on location, so Nick, thank you for hosting us, and we have some wonderful beer here to enjoy. What are we drinking?
What we have in front of us here is called West LA Hopaway. It is our number one sold beer in our tap room. It is a West Coast style IPA that features mosaic hops. So it has a nice balance of malt and tropical fruit character from the hops.
Mosaic hops, is that like, it has a lot of different, like, it's like a mosaic.
Absolutely. With a flavor wheel, it has a lot of flavors.
A flavor wheel?
Uh-huh.
Is that how you define hops?
Hops do have a 12-point wheel spectrum that can range everywhere from tropical to citrus to piney, herbal, earthy, floral, all sorts of different types of flavors.
Something for everyone?
Yep.
Pretty much.
Yeah, absolutely. So German beers are a little bit more floral and earthy, and English beers are definitely a little bit more earthy. Belgian hops have a little bit more spice character to them. American hops can be definitely more fruity and everywhere from citrus to orange to mango and papaya. Lots of different flavors.
I've seen a lot of hazy IPAs lately. Is that a big thing going on right now?
It has become a big thing.
What does that mean, hazy?
Hazy IPAs, as you can see, the beer that we have is pretty clear for the most part. It's an unfiltered beer, so it's not crystal clear, but it doesn't look like orange juice in a sense. The style of IPA lately has become called hazy or juicy IPAs, and what they do is they take the bitterness out of the beer. So the flavor that people love or hate the most in IPAs is the bitterness, and when you take that bitterness away, it attracts to more people's palates.
That is true. My wife, Kimber, does not like IPAs because of the bitterness. Mm-hmm. So I guess the juicy IPAs is the way to go for.
Yep. So it is the IPA for a non-IPA drinker.
Well, and maybe, Kathleen, you're not a big beer drinker, so maybe that's something you can test out.
Sure, yeah.
Well, Nick, we were talking before the show that you feel everyone can be a beer drinker, correct?
I feel there is a beer for everyone, even if they haven't found it yet.
That's probably my case.
We will have to sample and find you a beer.
I've only ever found one beer, and it was, a sour?
It was a sour. Well, that's another big thing right now.
Sours are very popular. They totally break the mold of traditional beers and what people think of as beer. And they bridge the gap into wine and spirit kind of flavors.
That makes sense why I would like it. So where did you learn all of this?
So I fell in love with beer when I moved to Fort Collins, Colorado. So I was born and raised here in Atlanta, graduated high school, moved to Fort Collins, went to Colorado State University. When I was going through college, it was all about getting a different six-pack of beer from all the local craft breweries out there.
Is that what attracted you to Colorado? Because there was a lot of craft beer out there, or it just happened to be?
Happened to be.
Yeah.
Yep, right place at the right time.
Okay.
I was raised with going on vacation out west frequently, so I knew growing up that I wanted to find myself living out there after high school and living here. And we toured a bunch of schools out there, and Fort Collins actually was the best school for my major,
which was
natural resource tourism. So I got to study why people traveled and spent money and did what they did. And being in Fort Collins, which they call the Napa Valley of beer, my education, even though it was an environmental background, was heavily focused on the beer tourism. And out west, beer is drastically more environmentally friendly, and breweries out there are like New Belgium Brewing, who we're family friends with. New Belgium Brewing's main mission point is sustainability.
They brew Fat Tire.
Fat Tire.
That's like their most popular.
Their main one. And so when I was in my senior CAP class in college, I was able to write a business plan on opening a brew pub. And while everybody else was writing business plans on opening an outfitter or a whitewater rafting shop or a fly fishing shop, I was writing on how to open a brew pub.
You were the only one.
I was the only one. I got special permission for that. So I literally got to study how to do what we're living and breathing now.
Oh, that's so cool.
So that was a really big opportunity for me. We had to have an internship as a part of that, so I was able to work with a brewery.
Which brewery did you work with?
There was a couple different breweries out there. The main one was living with the family of New Belgium. I got to see and experience a lot of the behind-the-scenes, more operations side, and was really eye-opening, and especially to see where technology has gone, but where pencil and paper still comes into play, and a lot of the scheduling and a lot of things are still done with pencil and paper, and it's interesting to see all the moving parts of a brewery that size. They're the fourth largest craft brewery in the country. So,
well, didn't they just open in North Carolina not too long ago?
Yep, a couple years ago they opened a second facility in Asheville, and it's a beautiful facility. So if you haven't been to New Belgium in Asheville or Fort Collins,
check it out.
I highly recommend it.
So how did you end up here? Did you know when you were writing the plan in your class that you wanted to come back here?
At that time, there was actually a failed brew pub in Fort Collins, and my father and I were heavily trying to take that brew pub over, and it fell through, and we made a goal that we would have a brew pub together at some point in our lives. And so then when my dad opened the Rick Tanner's restaurant next door.
In Forsyth County.
In Forsyth County. Great Forsyth County. We moved back from Colorado to help him run the restaurant. We had the vision many, many years ago that this space that we're actually sitting in was going to be our beer hall, and had the location for the brewery space next to us. And so we had this all planned out kind of from the beginning back in 2008 and 2009. When I was in Colorado is really what created the entire concept. Our brew pub concept was really created out of what I was doing every day in Colorado. So we lived on Cherry Street in downtown Fort Collins.
Hence the name.
Yep. We started a homebrew club, and our club, we called it a cooperative. In Fort Collins, there was a bike co-op, food co-op, and agriculture co-op. So we said, let there be a beer co-op. And we were college kids, all college kids at the time. We shared equipment. We bulk bought ingredients together. It was a way for us to share the education and the experience without the expense. And I spent all my money on brewing equipment when I was in college. So
you didn't spend it on an Xbox or
No.
a PlayStation?
Clothes.
No. Definitely not.
Like the typical college kid?
Definitely not any of those. I actually got a job at a hardware store and learned how to put a bunch of stuff together and play with parts and fittings, and had a lot of fun building a couple different small brewing systems over the years, and just extremely hands-on. And that's why I think we've gone so far in our time, is that I am extremely hands-on and did a lot of the build-out and a lot of the work, all the physical work in the brewery, getting it going.
You could probably save a lot of money doing it that way, too.
Yeah.
We saved a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of energy. But the number one thing that I've learned over the years was a piece of advice: know how to fix everything in your brewery, but know when to call a professional. And
That's a good one.
I've learned that the hard way a couple times.
Do you have an example? Do you want to share it, or is that...
Friday at 4 o'clock, don't try thawing out your beer cooler for the weekend and hit the wrong pipe and cause it to shut down. So
Oh, no.
at that time, you call the professional in.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you opened in 2012?
2012, we actually got our final approval on 12-12-12.
Oh, cool.
So we make a 12 malt, 12 hop, 12% barley wine that we serve on 12-12 every year. And we age it for 12 months in these barrels sitting behind us. So this coming year, we'll have 3 different types of whiskey and bourbon barrels of that beer.
There were a lot of obstacles becoming a brew pub or opening a brewery in Forsyth County.
So Forsyth has had a lot of growth over the years lately. And when it comes to something like an alcohol ordinance change, it's based off of necessity. So when we went to open our business here, the laws were set from the original brew pub laws from many, many years ago.
Like Prohibition time.
Not that long, but long, essentially. As long as brew pub code has been in existence, that was from that. And so there was some recent changes on the state level, so we had to get the county to adopt the state changes. And then really, as the state has changed ordinances or changed perceptions on things, then we have to go to the county and ask them to adopt those changes. So my work on the bigger level was I was on the board for the Georgia Craft Brewers Guild for 2 years and directly involved with legislation on the state level. So that was a real unique experience, a real unique opportunity to hang out down at the Capitol.
Lots of fun.
Which is, you have to be a very specific type of person to...
Did you need a beer after?
A few.
Were there any good bars around there?
There are a handful.
Yeah. Any that carry Cherry Street?
Then no, but now yes.
Okay. Was it last year or a few years ago where the to-go law, the beer bill, what is all that?
So in the state of Georgia, there are two types of brewing licenses, brew pub and brewery. And the brew pub license focuses on more retail consumption, more of a restaurant and bar setting, where the brewery is more set up for a wholesale operation. Generally, they're not in the most retail type of settings. They're generally in industrial or warehouse districts, things like that. So the brew pub and brewery laws have changed back and forth over the years. So breweries will get a change one year, then the next year brew pubs will get a change, and it has been going back and forth over the years. So a couple of years ago, the state has always had the interpretation that brew pubs selling beer to go was against state legislation. However, it was never stated in there that brew pubs could not sell beer to go. It just didn't say they could sell beer to go. So it was challenged in a really unique way to the State Department of Revenue, and they came back and said, per this interpretation, we see it fit that brew pubs can sell beer to go, but based off of a local ordinance. So there wasn't a state ordinance that said this is what you can and can't do. So it went down to the local ordinance. So then we went to Forsyth County. So the nice thing for me and for Cherry Street and for Forsyth County is that we have some dear friends right down the road in Alpharetta that were extreme pioneers in writing some code for local ordinances. So we essentially took their code and presented it to Forsyth County, and they adopted pretty much the same thing.
That's pretty cool.
And so, which was really nice because Alpharetta literally wanted to be the first city in the whole state where a brew pub could sell beer to go. And they were the second because Savannah already allows for open container consumption around the city. And where the brew pubs down there could have technically been doing this all along.
Right.
The mayor came out and was like, I don't need to write anything in the ordinance. It's already legal. So we'll just go ahead.
Have at it, yeah.
But Alpharetta was extremely positive and wanted to be the leader in the state for that. So us being close to Alpharetta worked out really well.
So were you third?
Unfortunately, we were not third. There were a couple others that had already had some code going, but when it took effect on the state level. So we weren't too far off from when the state came out and said it's good.
Sure.
So to then kind of bounce opposite with breweries, so the breweries law changed back in September of this past year. So September 1st, breweries can now sell customers pints of beer and beer to go, where before September 1st, somebody consuming beer at a brewery was in a tour and a sampling setup versus an actual bar, hangout, taproom setting.
So I'm originally from Illinois, and the brewery laws are very different in Illinois than, well, now it's in Georgia, it's a lot more open, or it's a lot more flexible. But in Illinois, I mean, you could go into a brewery and buy a pint from the brewery. You didn't need to buy a tour, which when I moved here, I thought that was the most bizarre thing, where you're paying for like $12 for a tour and you get samples. of the beer. I thought that was very odd. It's a very weird way to do it.
It's a very backwards way of doing it, and we've worked really hard to clean that up. Brew pubs, with what we have at our license, we've been able to do almost everything that breweries couldn't do. And it was really, on the state level, it was contradictory. The licenses contradicted each other. A brew pub can do this, but a brewery can't do this. But we're doing the same thing. So it was extremely contradictory. And so we worked really hard to allow the consumer to know what's going on. The average consumer does not know the difference between a brewery and a brew pub or care.
The dumbed down definition of what a brew pub versus a brewery.
So a brew pub like us, we have to sell 50% food versus alcohol sales over the course of the year. We have a volume cap on how much beer we can brew in a year, and then furthermore, how much beer we can distribute in a year. And our primary basis is for on-site retail sales, where a brewery can brew as much beer as they want, distribute as much beer as they want, but they now, with the law change, have a volume cap on what they can serve. So they can only sell 3,000 barrels of beer a year in their tap room, whether it be on-site or to go, which doesn't seem like a large number, but it actually is an extremely large number.
Do you think it would be hard for a brewery to hit that?
That number was created based off of the next state over largest brewery's taproom sales, and they are much larger than the largest brewery in Georgia. So,
Was it Florida?
No,
Alabama?
North Carolina.
Oh, okay.
So we were told a couple years ago that the Sierra Nevada Brewing in Asheville, that opened another facility up there from California, they have one of the largest tap rooms in the Southeast for what they're doing. And they didn't hit that number last year, 2 years ago. And so if they didn't even hit that number or come close to that number, then Georgia still has some growth in that for
Has a little bit weight.
Sweetwater. I mean, Sweetwater is the largest. Sweetwater and Terrapin. But Sweetwater had no problems with that number because they were conversed when we created the bill.
How is that different from just like a restaurant or a bar if you want to get beer?
Well, because aren't you're brewing it yourself?
Is that the only difference, that you brew it yourself?
We're brewing it ourselves, and then we sell it ourselves, which generally has a much lower cost of goods and a much higher return on that.
Oh, it's business.
Yeah.
Like the business plan from
Should've-
Fort Collins.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, because I'm thinking, can't you go to a bar and they can just sell as much beer as they possibly can, but it's not an issue?
Well, it still falls under the 50% food versus alcohol sales. So a restaurant cannot exceed 50% alcohol sales compared to their food sales. And if they exceed that, then there's other stipulations.
Okay.
Which causes restaurants or bars to not be open on Sunday. It's what I kind of coined the Athens bar law, even though it doesn't come from that. But in Athens, there are so many just bars that don't sell food, and they cannot be open on Sundays.
At all on Sunday?
At all on Sunday. They can't sell alcohol on Sunday, so if they're not...
So you can be
yeah.
open, but you have
You can
to
have
sell...
like a Coke.
Yeah, you can have a Coke or the dollar hot dogs that we got going.
That's
Yeah.
That's about it. So we definitely are more of a food-driven service type of business, where a brewery now is more of a casual hangout.
And so you guys are expanding to Halcyon? Right?
Halcyon, yep.
Is that going to be the same type of setup, or will it be a different kind?
It's going to be very similar to what we have now. So the other major stipulation with brew pubs in the state is that we have to brew all of our beer on site for each location. So we cannot brew beer here and take it down there. We have to brew there as well. So we're putting in another brewing system at
Wow.
that location as well.
And I guess for those who don't know, Halcyon is a new mixed-use development that's going in Forsyth.
It's right near the Forsyth-Fulton border off exit 12 on Georgia 400.
It's opening soon.
So they say. Supposed to be later
Soon
this
is
year.
relative.
Yeah.
It's going to be, they set the grand opening date for March 2019.
Oh, there you go.
So our building and a handful of other buildings are going through permitting process right now, so we're really close to starting build out, which is really exciting. The apartment complex is well underway already, so we're excited to be opening our business with residents already living on site. It's going to be great. We're having the full restaurant side, then there's going to be the tap room side. Yeah, the brewery is going to be inside the tap room, so it'll be much more visible, like the barrels and the tanks that are sitting around us in the room we're in. The tanks and the barrels will all be surrounding the entire inside. So you you literally feel like you're sitting in the brewery.
That's cool.
In the tap room side. And then we're going to have a large beer garden space. So we're really, really looking forward to the beer garden space. We are the main freestanding building in the middle of the shopping center, of the retail village. And the Halcyon development is doing a really unique thing, finally bridging the gap on the greenway between Forsyth and Alpharetta. And they are currently relocating the trailhead of the greenway that ends on the going south from Forsyth at the bridge at McFarland. And they're relocating it over to essentially the intersection where the entrance to the retail village is. So the greenway will kind of come in and out of Halcyon now.
Oh, that's
That'll be cool.
Our main goal and what we're looking forward to is beer to go. And we can sell beer in pint plastic cups to go, and people can walk around the shopping center. We're really looking for more of the active lifestyle going through there with the greenway.
Very cool.
That is very cool.
And they're supposed to be having a little bit more of a green space and park setting in the middle with really nice landscaping and such going in to give it more of a actual park feel.
That's cool. Less industrial, less building enclosed. I have a random question. Are you kind of talked about it here and there. Are you friends with a lot of the local breweries or brewers?
We are. We are a very tight-knit community. All businesses compete against each other. And yes, we are businesses. And yes, we do compete against each other on a number of levels. But our industry as a whole is a low percentage compared to our competitors. So the big beer in the world is the competitor. So when you group craft beer together, it's not really comparing business to business. You're comparing craft beer or independent breweries to large breweries now. So the way that I look at it and the way that a lot of people in our industry look at it is if you can get one person, like hopefully with you sampling some beers later, if you can get one person into drinking craft beer, then that's a win for everybody. And that's what's really important. And shelf space at the liquor stores is getting tighter, and tap space is becoming more rotational. And so it is becoming a little bit harder to get a tap placement at a restaurant or bar and keep it there. But more places now are rotating beers, so you do have a higher opportunity of sales in other places.
Where you might not have been before.
Correct. We have the true belief that a rising tide raises all ships, and that's what we say, and that's what we believe in. The coolest thing about our industry is we have an email as a part of our Brewers Guild that we can just send an email out to that URL or whatever, and it goes to all the breweries, and everybody responds and talks about stuff. And
that's neat.
So we are a tight-knit group.
Do you ever have a Miller Lite or a Bud Light, or is that like sacrilegious?
Well,
that's a loaded question.
I plead the fifth, yeah.
I have had a saying in the past that the best beer is a free beer. So depending on, so sometimes you can't be that picky, but I'm a major proponent of where that money goes. So I would never spend my money on that type of product, but if it were in front of me, I wouldn't say no to drinking it.
Sure.
So that's the biggest thing with where the craft breweries are nowadays. This year, actually, as a whole, across the country, have made a push to start calling us more independent breweries versus craft breweries. And beers like Blue Moon. Blue Moon is definitely brewed off of a traditional European-style wheat beer. It's brewed contrary and different than American macro large brewery beer. So it definitely falls into a different spectrum than Budweiser or Coors, but it is brewed by Coors. A Blue Moon is a Coors beer. So when it comes to marketing and perception, Blue Moon is marketed and perceived as a craft beer, but it is not. It may be craft in a sense of what the definition of craft itself is,
right?
But it's not independent. So independent is the word that's really starting to get used more this year, and it really makes a lot of sense. So the Brewers Association, which is our national organization that's based out of Colorado, they created a campaign last year with independent brewery. They created a logo, a seal. But now breweries across the country are putting that seal on all their packaging, cans and bottles and things. And I've been in a lot of arguments and a lot of conversation about it. And it's mostly about where the money goes. It doesn't talk about quality. It doesn't talk about business practice. It doesn't talk about anything like that. To me, the seal of the independent brewer is about conscious buying decisions.
And other people don't believe that?
There was a lot of argument about, well, just because it has the independent seal doesn't make it a great beer.
I gotcha.
So it's more, it had a quality kind of focus to it.
So some people want to have that independent seal as a representation of quality.
It can be perceived that way as well, which I will rightfully admit that we all have brewed a bad batch of beer in the past. I mean, things happen. But just because it is a craft brewery or an independent brewery doesn't make it a phenomenal beer, but it lets the person buying the beer know where their money's going. And that's what's important to me. You know, that it's more than just beer in that conscious decision-making, purchase decision. So it falls into our motto and our saying. Our saying here is know your brewer. Mm-hmm. And know your brewer means know your community, know what you're a part of, know your neighbor. You know, if more people got out and talked to their neighbors, this world would be a different world. But it's just knowing your surroundings, being conscious of your surroundings.
Know where things are coming from that you're consuming or spending money on.
Do you see a lot of that in your tap room where people will come in and start talking to the person next to them and start up a conversation that maybe they wouldn't have before?
Oh, absolutely. I love the demographic in the area that we're located in. This part of Forsyth County is a really good group of people, and people live out here for a reason. I think the outgoing of people's attitudes around here is a byproduct of why they're here. So it's a cool thing to experience that. In the tap room, it's more of a social setting, and that's what we really want to promote is talking and chatting, interaction. Mm-hmm. We pride ourselves on what the definition of pub means, and we feel like we're a true example of the definition of pub. And pub stands for public house. And the public house back in England and Ireland and such back in the day was the center meeting place of the community. It's where you may look over, like here currently, you may look over and the judge off the record, or the coach or the sheriff or the fire marshal, like they're frequenting here, and we take care of them, and this is the place that they know that they can either come to see people or come to get away.
My hometown, I grew up in Naperville, Illinois. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but there's a brewery there called Solemn Oath. You might have heard of it. When I would go back to visit my family, I would always go there with my buddies to hang out because, it's a brewery, it's a place to hang. And it was so weird the first time that I saw my old high school gym teacher. It was just like so bizarre, but it's a place to hang out. It's for everybody.
It's a local pub.
Yeah.
Well, that's the point to be made coming off of that is a point that I make often. And when I was living in Colorado and I was living with the family of New Belgium, they taught me that beer is much more than just an alcoholic beverage. It's community, it's social, it's humble, it's charitable. You can do so much with beer than just drink it. And I hate to use the word capitalize, but that's our mission point. Community, sustainability, and education is what we do on a daily basis. So the amount of charity work we do, and which is, I guess, kind of a nice plug to be talking about our beer fest that's coming up at the end of this month.
I was just going to ask you about that.
So we do a lot of charity work, and we get involved with a lot of little local groups and stuff. Like actually next week we're brewing a beer with a local charity called Meals by Grace, and they just built a greenhouse up this area, and they create a lot of food for less privileged families and such, which is just an amazing thing, especially out here in Forsyth County being so affluent. Mm-hmm. And to see that there's a need for, it's crazy. But they do such a great thing. So they're actually coming in and brewing a beer with us that we're going to serve at their banquet in May.
Oh,
and
cool.
It's those little things that goes a long way. It means a lot.
Have you picked the style of beer that you're going to brew?
They picked. Yeah, absolutely. They got to us. We talk about it. The couple of the guys are actually homebrewers, so they have a good recipe base, and
sure,
they wanted to brew a hoppy wheat beer. So we're going to brew a wheat ale with a little bit of hop citrus character, some orange peel, a little bit on the Belgian wheat style, but Americanized.
When you're coming up with a new beer recipe, like you call it's a recipe, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you try it out at home first, like on a small batch? Or do you just say, hey, I'm just gonna go for it? I'm pretty sure I know what I'm doing.
Yes and no. I wish I could say yes more so, but the point of our operation is small batch and variety. The biggest thing that I learned in writing that business plan in college was essentially what I studied was why their brew pubs were not successful in the 90s. And the brew pubs in the 90s and early 2000s